most of us are gone now of that era. I'm one of the few remaining. There aren't
Yeah.
too many because you look back at how many are gone now, and it's just like it's mind blowing to me
Yeah.
that, and they weren't that old. Many of them gone in their 50s and 60s, which is just it just shows you how tough that business is physically on these guys that were. It was a great time for them. They had the greatest fame they could have ever achieved, but boy, did they pay a price. They really did.
Do you believe it was a lifestyle too of traveling around the world and just eating whatever you can find and going to parties or something like that? Is it the lifestyle you think?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Back then too, I think that these guys today, obviously, take much better care of themselves. I'm sure there's some abuse or whatever, but
Yeah.
but back then, these guys were just trying to make a living, and you were an independent contractor. If you got hurt, you didn't get paid.
Right.
You didn't have guaranteed contracts. So these guys, and if people know about that era, these guys would travel weeks at a time, performing 6 or 7 days a week in different cities. They basically all the company did was give them a stack of plane tickets. They were responsible for their rental cars. Many would team up. They were responsible for their hotel rooms. They had to pay for their own food. So and they had to be in different places. They grouped venues, and so they would go and hit one city, get done that night, either drive that night right after the show's over to the next place. And so you're trying to stay up, so you're popping stuff that's going to make you awake and not fall asleep
Right.
at the wheel. You're got to wake up in the morning, so you got something else you got to get you up, or you got to get something to get you to sleep. You got to go to sleep. Then you got to find a gym because you got to stay in shape. Well, it's hard to stay in shape when you're moving like that, so you're going to do other things that are going to help you stay that way. So you're putting a lot of stuff into your body to go nonstop, so you can go home for 3 days, kiss your kids, and then get back on the road. I mean, it was brutal. They made a lot of money, and I'm sure they loved every minute of it. But at the same time, man, did it take a toll. These guys are, they're in car wrecks every night. Now, anybody can say what they want about what those guys do in the ring, but you're bouncing off concrete. Anybody that's ever been in a ring, oh, sure, it's padded. Oh, yeah. Well, just go in a ring and then just fall on your back and see what that feels like. Imagine doing it off, one of the turnbuckle there. And they were doing stuff back then. It's gone way. It's like crazy now what they do. But there were things going on, like Hell in a Cell and those guys doing that. And they were back in the day with the barbed wire and everything else and the tacks. And they didn't do that, with the WWF. But at the time, they were still doing things that were taking a major toll on their bodies. And that car ain't going to last. And so many of them get in their 50s and 60s that knows what it's done to their heart and the rest of their body. And it's tragic.
Yeah.
And so many of those guys that I work with, somebody sent me a book. This was years ago too. It was called Tributes or something. And there was, 10 guys in there that were dead that I had worked with, and you're like, wow, well, it's easier to name the ones that have passed than the ones that are still with us.
I was just going to say that it feels like that's the case. But when you worked there, when you were an employee, did you have benefits?
Oh yeah, well, as a staff employee, yeah, they took very good care of us. The insurance was great. They didn't have stock at the time because it wasn't a publicly traded company then, but they had profit sharing. I mean, it was a very good company, and I know that's never changed. But as far as the way the guys worked, and it was all based on like old school. I mean, whatever they made, they were paid by the gate.
Yes.
So when you went to arena, if there was, a good crowd, you were going to make a good payday. If not, you didn't. That's why, if the traditions in wrestling, when you go into a locker room and, when everybody comes in, they shake their hands. I don't know if
Yeah.
they do that anymore.
Oh, they still do it.
Every single person would come in, but you'd go around the room and the tradition behind that is that you were thanking this guy for helping you put food on your table.
Mm.
So if somebody like Hulk was there that night, that's a big night for everybody. He's going to help. He's going to bring a lot of people there, and they're going to get a piece of that gate. But that certainly has changed since then. But that's how it works.
Not
The
anymore.
reason they made a lot of money is because they got bigger crowds. It wasn't because they once the guys got more and more famous, and then they got the merchandise deals and all like that. But it was a tough life. Really.
Guaranteed money now, obviously, is the incentive of if you're going on the road. Now, and they cut their days off, too, for a long time. Like you said, it was like 6 days, 7 days, on weekends, double shots. And now in today's world, they cut off at least 3 or 4 days. So you work Saturday, Sunday, Monday, take off Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, fly out, land Saturday, over and over.
Yeah.
Because they've realized you can't work these people like they're a piece of plastic. Like, they are human beings who have real feelings, who have families, loved ones that they want to see. And you don't want to hear the stories that when I interview older wrestlers today, where I'm like, what was it like? How many times did you see your kids? They're like, I saw my kid maybe once a month. And that's not on a birthday. You're missing Christmases, Thanksgiving. You're missing holidays, weddings, to put food on the table. But yet at the same time, do these kids care about, I want to see my dad. I want to see my mom. I don't care that we have this big giant mansion. And it really becomes this weird dynamic of, I'm trying to do what's best for my family by making money because the only way I know how to. But my family is suffering for this lifestyle. It's like, it's a very weird dynamic on how to supply this. So when you're on the road, because you're going on the road, but you're not going on the road like these wrestlers in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
So the event center is, you're shooting all day long, I'm assuming, in one shot, an 8-hour, 10-hour day, versus, and you live in Connecticut. So you're driving from the Stanford to your house back to Stanford versus wrestlers traveling to California, to Boston, to New York. So your event center days, what are those like? Are you starting it from the crack of dawn to the end of time and at night?
Well, yeah, and I certainly had it better than anybody in a sense as being an announcer and that kind of thing, because I would go to the TVs every 3 weeks or so, and then of course the pay-per-views. But I had a normal life. I lived in Stanford. I lived in Norwalk, actually, which is 10 minutes away from Stanford, from the studios. But the actual process of putting those event centers together was brutal. I mean, we did anywhere from 90 to sometimes over 100 markets. And if anybody remembers, I would do 3 hits in a show, and each one of those consisted of 3 bridges, like the intro, bridge, tag, and and I would have 3 different ones, and every single one of them was different. And I had, there was just too much material, so you couldn't script that. We had a teleprompter, but it was of no use to me, because you had to change the venue. It would have taken forever. So I had to ad lib all that stuff. And what I would do is we would use a lot of the same interviews for different markets, because they could be used. This guy was going to be in the same place or whatever. But at the same time, I had to make sure I kept where I was, or, whatever the venue was. And you'd refer to that at the beginning and the end. And that would be, it was just for each show. With Superstars, it was Challenge, it was Primetime, it was Spotlight. I did stuff for the UK at the time. That's when they just started doing Sky Television. So it was crazy. By the time Thursday came around, I was wiped out, because I would go from the morning to the day. It was just, and then there was a red phone that sat on this desk that I would do all the stuff at. And Howard was in charge of the event center. He kept track of all of the different venues and stuff like that, Howard Finkel. And if one of the guys got hurt, now think about this, if one of them got hurt, and let's say he was scheduled to be in 20-something markets, Howard would call me, and the little light would go on, and I knew when that thing beeped, there was something happened, which meant a lot more work for me, because I'd have to go back into every one of those markets and change it, whoever they replaced that guy with. And I remember there's video of it, of Howard calling me, and you see me going, oh, hey, Howard, yeah. Really? Real? Okay. And I hang up the phone, and you see, I take the phone and I across the studio. Because I can't remember what it was going to be like. I'm not going home for a long time because this stuff had to be out. They pumped this stuff out, so it was. I certainly can't complain, but it was the best of both worlds. It was, look at all these things I'm doing. Look at all the places I am. But at the same time, oh, man, did I pay a price for doing it? Because I would just sit in there and just say the same stuff over and over and over again with a different city, a different town, week after week. But it was, look what I got to do. I was
a normal life
over the world. Yeah. And it was a great time. But, everybody has to pay a price.
Right.
But nothing like what the guys did.
Of course.
People really, understand. And I'm not in that world today. I don't know how the guys, I know it's not an easy life because you still get, getting beaten up and you're every day and all that. But back then, just what they did, I always tell people, you sell your soul to the devil for that time because you're going to get everything you ever wanted. You're going to have more fame. They were rock and roll stars. Those guys couldn't go anywhere. And yet they paid the price with their family, their relationships with their kids. Like you said, you weren't just not there during the week or something. You missed everything.
Yeah.
We always worked on Thanksgiving, there was always something going on, and these guys, you weren't there. And when you were there,
either.
yeah, and you talked to a lot of the guys, they say when they were home, they weren't there. They were exhausted. They slept. They were in a bad mood because of, all the, and they didn't connect. The kids, how could they? And these kids go to school and they've got this unbelievable famous dad, and all that kid wants is him to be there. Just home.
I bet these kids are like, "Oh, your dad, it's Roddy Piper. Your dad, Jake the Snake, or your dad, so and so." Yeah. Oh, it must be so awesome. Well, I don't see him ever, so.
Well, yeah.
Is that awesome? And I guess that's you said the price to pay. You sold your soul to the devil to get all the fame, all the fortune, being a celebrity, but everybody else around you has to suffer the consequences of your dreams coming true. So in reality, when people say, "I want my dream to come true," well, I guess they don't realize what will happen to the people around them as well.
Yeah. I mean, I remember talking to a couple of the kids, I won't mention names, but that were kids of these guys, and they would hope they'd get hurt. They don't want, career ending, but they would be home. They'd be home for a month or something, and imagine that. But it was, it was a double-edged sword because in a lot of ways it's selfish because of course this is something they've dreamed about their whole lives, and they justify it by saying, "But look what I'm doing. Look what I'm offering, getting for my family. Look at how they get to live. They, got a beautiful house, get to go to great schools. They get to drive nice cars, but." The biggest part is you're not part of it.